Now joining us is Cyril Mtambo, who's from the South African Cemeteries Association. He's the deputy chairperson at the association. Cyril, thank you so much for the time. I guess the insert just before you talking about insurance fraud being a key aspect of this, but we won't necessarily go into that. But one imagines that for the Cemeteries Association, or just cemeteries in general, it really has been a difficult time. And some of those key issues, land, wanting different areas, spacing, etc., urban sprawl. How difficult a task are you facing right now as the Cemeteries Association?
Good afternoon to you and to your viewers. And we are grateful for the opportunity as a South African Cemeteries Association to have this space to ventilate our views and our input. Of course, the issue that are happening outside, they have their own way to come in, and ultimately they impact the cemetery and the crematoria space. So definitely, if there are issues of urban sprawl and the urban migration, you will find that it starts to impact on the issue of the land, and also the space that was once set aside for cemeteries. Will find that the priority will then start to shift, and then those spaces be given to the development of houses, because there is now the connection that exists between the living and the dead. So yes, it does impact in one way or another.
Yeah, and how are you mitigating this? How do you work around it then, as you know, as cemetery associations? How do you work around, particularly the shortage of land?
Look, I think the greatest question, Arabile, would be to say how is the response, in particular of the municipalities, because we fully understand that in terms of the current laws at this point, the burials and the cremations and everything that relates to the cemetery and crematoria, it is lying at the doorstep of municipalities. So in this instance, I think the greatest question would be to say, are we doing enough to respond to the call as municipalities? So in answering your question straight, what we do is more on promoting the issue of sustainable burial practices, which then will reduce the pressure towards of what we are seeing, as this is now having an impact by the densely populated cities that we are seeing in particular, because that is where you're going to feel the pinch. But in reality, it's a matter of starting to have this conversation even more and educating more the public, which needs to be more knowledgeable in terms of the burial alternatives method that are out there, other than the conventional way that we are used to, which is an in-earth burials.
Are you finding that people are turning to those burial alternatives a little bit more? And of course, some of those, including cremations then as well, aquamations, I think are some of those that are also at play, and I don't know how much you get to deal with that. But how many of those are you beginning to see?
Look, with the exposure and with the involvement that we are engaging as the South African Cemeteries Association with the municipalities across the country, one can say without any doubt, Pagatwa, that there is a shift now with this generation, if you compare to the generation that preceded this one, because there was more of rigidness. But the generation now that we're starting to engage with, that they're starting to show interest, and also the understanding of the culture not being static, but also having an opportunity that it can be explored to accommodate the pace that things are moving towards. So definitely there is a shift. It will not be at a pace that we all want it to be, but one can start to see a registration of such, where we used to have wall of remembrances without anyone, especially from a black culture or communities, is cremated. Now you're starting to see people coming to inquire about that. And also the proven records of the African families that have also opted for aquamation as part of the burial alternatives which are out there. So definitely there is a change, but of whether is it where we want to be, that will remain a question.
Yeah, one imagines as well that cultural practices come to the fore here when you're looking for alternative measures. How do you and communities and municipalities come together then to ensure then that the cultural practices that families are looking for and specific needs are actually then dealt with sufficiently? Because one can imagine that each family may want different things, each culture may require different things.
Thank you so much for raising that. I think it's very, very crucial. It's a crucial question that maybe for many years, or I will say in the past, it was a question that was a taboo to ask. But I think the time is ripe now that we confront these questions, as sensitive they can be. But I don't think that we do have a luxury now of not discussing these issues. Remember, death is perceived differently from different perspectives of culture and religion. But at the end of the day, they're all impacting towards the very same competition of space where we need to accommodate the living and also those that have departed. Now, if you're looking at how our societies and the framework of the law in our country is structured, we've got within the Constitution, which is an apex body for in terms of the law, we've got the Bill of Rights, and these Bill of Rights are the cornerstone of our democracy, and it encapsulates it so well, and it enshrines that the issue of cultural and linguistic communities, together with the environment, they coexist within those Bill of Rights. So as an association, then that is where we are then coming in just to bring the linkage between the two, to say we need to spark this conversation and this debate in a form of interviews as we're having today, and also in a form of conferences that we have, and also with the training cemetery workshops that we are conducting in consultation or collaborating with SALGA, both at the national or in the provincial level, to say this conversation must now start to go on. And if there are some difficulties or some clashes of culture and religions, then we find a way which is not inflaming or putting other parties or other religious groupings at a disadvantage, but then to say, what is it that we can do so that we can arrive at the same standpoint? And if the conversation is done in respect, as it should, we are seeing that there is now a shift from the resistance that we once had, and now even those groups that that wanted to do anything about the subject, they're starting to come now and say, let us have this conversation and see how can we move forward so that we can all respond to the question in hand.
Gianni, Babu Cyril Mtambo, thank you so much for the time. Really appreciate it. I think a fascinating and interesting conversation, one that is ultimately changing as times go by as well. So very interesting to see how people are making what some might call sustainable end-of-life choices. So appreciate your time as well this afternoon there. Cyril Mtambo is the Deputy Chairperson then of the South African Cemeteries Association.